You ever find yourself in a social situation with someone who just sucks the air out of the room? Somebody who just can't be positive to save their life? Someone who just turns absolutely every discussion, every point around to some negative thing, some example of the awfulness of the world or the awfulness of the people around him for that matter? I know this guy fairly well. I've met him a number of times, and, well, sometimes I've been him. And it doesn't feel good. It certainly doesn't make anybody else around them feel good. And I've kind of been forced to wonder why. Been thinking about this a lot recently, and some of the discussion from yesterday's video prompted me to think a bit more about this. I mentioned the archetypal character of like Rick from Rick and Morty or House MD or Sherlock Holmes as an example of this guy, where no matter what it is that they do, they simply cannot play nice in civil society. Which is not to say that pure niceness, pure civility is a virtue in and of itself, because no, it is not. In fact, sometimes niceness can be the wrong thing to do, and sometimes incivil behavior is required in order to either make a point or to get something accomplished. But what I'm more thinking about is like the compulsiveness towards incivil or rude or unkind behavior on a regular basis. Now, there's lots of different reasons why this might be the case, why someone might do this, and the simplest and most straightforward explanation, the most charitable explanation, is that you don't know any better. You just don't understand that you're being a bit of a dick face, and you're not picking up the social cues of the people around you, maybe. And, well, as much as the frowny faces that the folks at this gathering might have, and as much as they might be trying to convey this, there's still a certain social protocol that makes people unwilling to call out that kind of behavior, because like especially if they don't know, if they're not doing this intentionally, well, it would seem unkind to call someone out for their rude behavior. In the case of like people with autism, and myself, I have the symptoms of autism as well, like I didn't really learn the social cues naturally. I was a total foreigner when it came to human interaction well into my 20s. And it was only after like consciously studying these things after I recognized that I had this deficit that I actually even started to learn some of this stuff. Now I'm able to read body language and subtext and read between the lines, but for the longest time there I would, do inappropriate things because I didn't understand that I shouldn't be doing inappropriate things, that there's certain topics of conversation that just aren't appropriate in these sorts of social situations. But this doesn't exactly explain all the circumstances when I was behaving like this, nor when anyone else is explaining like that. Oftentimes, for me, it was an expression of discomfort. Because I didn't feel good inside, nobody else was able to feel good outside either. It was partially born of the fact that social situations were just generally uncomfortable for me, owing in large part to the fact that I didn't understand what was going on most of the time. But it was also just like a general dissatisfaction with my life, that this frustration that the world didn't conform to my expectations, that the competitive structure of our capitalist liberal society doesn't advantage me in any way, that I am the underdog in a lot of situations. And so this displeasure, this discomfort ended up manifesting itself as a constant criticism, where if any phenomenon would come up, like I would find some reason to explain why it's horrible, why there is a problem with this thing. And I mean, this is part of the role of the social critic, the theorist that understands society and points out why the bad things that happen. But there's also something to be said for just letting things go, man. That being said, this is not an argument for just pure civility. This isn't I'm not like advocating for tone policing. Tone policing being like criticizing people for how they're saying what they're saying rather than actually addressing the argument in question. This is often leveled against people who are of marginalized populations, such as like women or people of color, when they're expressing their outrage with visceral anger, rightfully so, and people are tutting them for like, oh well, you should be nicer about it. You should be more articulate about this. People won't take you seriously. But that's not what I'm advocating for here. In fact, I recognize and acknowledge that there are many circumstances where incivility is the thing to do. It's the only way to get a point across. It's the only way to get anything accomplished. What I'm actually talking about here is when one revels in that pain, when one is proud of their asshole-ish behavior, when one sees no reason to be anything but incivil to everyone they meet. This is where it starts to get a little pathological, and why I'm making this video in the first place. Because yes, a lot of it is motivated by frustration, an inability to effect change in the world, to exercise agency over one's surroundings, which stimulates this frustration, which stimulates this hostility. And as someone who's very familiar with that hostility, with that frustration, I can tell you that expressing it doesn't get you anywhere. It doesn't actually change anything. All it does is externalize the inner frustration and turmoil to the people around you, which causes you to alienate them, which causes them to be driven away, which causes you to be more isolated, which causes you to feel worse than you were in the first place. The appeal with somebody like Rick or House or Sherlock is this confidence that they exude. This idea that they don't give a shit, they're just going to do what they think is right, and they're just, nobody can stop them. And that is quite appealing to somebody who feels this level of frustration and a lack of agency in their lives. But I don't actually see their behavior as being a sign of strength. I actually see it as a sign of what Friedrich Nietzsche would call sickness in these folks. The sensation of pain that they're feeling, they're acting out that pain and alienating people and basically acting like a wrecking ball in order to get where they want to go, is actually a way of anesthetizing away their pain. It's a way of externalizing that sensation of frustration and anguish that they're fighting against into the problem that they're trying to solve. And by solving the problem, oftentimes that means destroying something in the process. In other words, this doesn't break away from the herd mentality of the status quo. This doesn't make you an independent and strong individual doing stuff however just one pleases, but rather it's a different kind of herd mentality. One is reacting so heavily against what one hates, what one despises, that one is actually controlled by that thing that they're despising and hating. You're actually confined to an even smaller set of activities and feelings and meanings than one would be if one just accepted the herd mentality in the first place. This is similar to what Nietzsche refers to as the last man being the archetypal nihilist, the one who is willing and able to destroy things, destroy all meaning, someone who is at the lion stage of the transformative process, the three-stage transformative process that Nietzsche outlines, but he's stuck there. He just can't advance beyond the lion stage. He can't actually create new meaning or generate new worldviews because he's just so set on destroying stuff. And this is a real pitfall. This is the place where a lot of folks can get stuck. And yeah, even sometimes I circle back around to this. I struggle with this extreme nihilism on a regular basis. And the danger in this is that you get stuck there and it impedes your personal growth. It impairs your ability to see beyond the pure destruction mode and into proposition, into world building, into finding connections with others who are seeking their own personal power. And that real power, that comes from being able to build worlds, being able to find meaning and structure meaning and co-create reality with other people. When I'm engaged in a disagreement with someone, when I'm trying to convey a political, economic, or ideological point to them, I very rarely go the aggressive route. I rarely get into insulting people for their intelligence and telling them that they're wrong directly. I used to do that, but I've realized just how ineffective it is. The reason for that being that when one is attacking a point of somebody else's worldview that is so closely held as to become part of one's inner ideology, it's actually attacking their subjectivity, because a fundamental part of one's worldview is one's conception of self. So if I start picking away at somebody's idea of what the world is like, I'm implicitly picking away at their position in that world, which threatens one's sense of self. And when oneself is threatened, one instinctually rebels against it. One gets defensive and starts getting aggressive in response in order to defend oneself. On the other hand, if one is addressing someone that you disagree with charity and kindness and generosity of spirit, it's a lot easier to actually get past that instinctual defensiveness. Making that connection of commonality, of a common understanding of at least this aspect of the world, can allow you to co-create an even more complex reality with that person, even if they're coming at it from a completely different direction. Now, I'm not promising miraculous results here. You'll probably never really be able to get through to a Nazi without some sort of extreme event, some extreme experience, but even still, like, there's counterexamples of specifically that thing, where this dude, he's African American, he went and just befriended members of the KKK. Just like went up to them, introduced himself, ingratiated himself to them, and just humanized himself to them. Made the KKK members realize that he's a human being. He's a decent guy. And that first they start thinking, oh, well, this guy's the exception. He must be one of the unique good people who are black. But then they start to realize, no, they're all like that. And these sorts of examples happen throughout history. There's another example of like a former neo-Nazi who, when he gets out of prison, he gets offered a job by a Jew. And then the same process happens. He thinks, well, this is just one kindly Jew. He's the exception. And then he starts getting integrated with the Jewish community. He starts learning and meeting lots more people of the Jewish faith. And he realizes, oh, they're actually all pretty good. They're just like everybody else. Everybody's kind of just human beings. We're all kind of living in the same world. It has a powerful way of changing minds. Just that act of kindness, that act of generosity of spirit. It allows people to slide right through that defensiveness and change people's worlds. Of course, I still slip in this. I do get hostile sometimes, and sometimes hostility is, appropriate. Sometimes it's important to stand up for yourself. I'm not saying, like, be a pushover and be charitable to every argument, because sometimes you just gotta be like, no, you're wrong. That's wrong. You should be ashamed of yourself, because sometimes that works better than any other argument that you could possibly make. Sometimes you gotta defend yourself, and sometimes you just gotta punch the Nazi. But we're all works in progress. We're all coming at this as totally ignorant creatures, just slowly piecing together an image of the world before we ultimately die. So we should be supportive of one another in that process. We should be co-creating our reality together. Anyway, I make these videos daily, and these are my attempt on helping to co-create reality. So if you enjoy this content, found it useful, like it and share it, and all those algorithmic things. Just hit 500 subscribers, so that's pretty cool. Thanks all of you for liking what I'm doing. If you have any comments or questions or anything like that, I'd be happy to hear from you, because it was comments and questions that gave rise to this episode. So thanks for watching all. See you tomorrow.